When I talk about connecting two native protocols using Ansible, the default when you're talking to a Unix-like system is going to be SSH because it's the most common remote connective way for that. But when you talk about network devices or storage area networks or programmable logic controllers and things that don't typically need or use SSH, um, I think a prime example of this would be a Windows server. So instead, we use WinRM, which is a protocol for that. And this allows you to kind of interface with other technologies that you need to automate in the way that they are meant to be interfaced with instead of having to create the kind of this intermediate compatibility layer. I generally think about this in terms of what do you want to automate and why are you automating it and how are you trying to create that automation experience for those who are going to use the automation capabilities you're providing. And generally, in the world of Ansible, we want everything to be idempotent transactions. So every task in an Ansible playbook is an idempotent transaction. And what that means is that it will inspect the state of the remote thing you're trying to automate. It will then inflict change upon it only when it is required. Otherwise, it will effectively passively just validate that the desired state and the end state are the same. So when you're talking about a service that you would generally talk to over a REST API or some sort of a network switch where you would otherwise have to, do a store config and then see all the output and those kind of things. And what you can do is you can define that transaction over that native protocol, regardless of what the type of technology or the end thing you're trying to automate is. And this allows you to realistically create that kind of consistent automation experience for not only yourself, but also those who are going to utilize the automation capability you're providing. And this gives you just that very pleasant, consistent, idempotent transaction so that you can just run your automation over and over again and always end up in the place you want to be. There's a lot of technologies that we utilize today, appliances, storage networks, online services, load balancers, different types of things that the way that you would interface with them will be different. The protocols they use will vary, and what you would generally use, a command line utility like curl or a Python library like requests to interface with, that makes it very unique for that transaction. Whereas by creating a connection plugin type for Ansible, you are able to still interface with it in that consistent manner and then create a series of tasks in a playbook. Then you can also combine playbooks into a workflow to where everything, regardless of what the actual type of endpoint you're trying to talk to is, everything remains consistent, and you're able to kind of stitch together what would have otherwise been disjoint processes into a single cohesive workflow. How would somebody get started doing this? That is an interesting question. It's going to depend on what you want, but it all starts with the docs. So the Ansible developer documentation has various guides for different personas, for types of device you might want to talk to. There's a complete framework around what we call HTTP API, which is anything that its remote endpoint talks HTTP, which is generally services that provide REST APIs, that kind of thing. We have a whole category of networking devices because there's probably half a dozen relatively popular protocols for talking to network devices. And there's some core componentry that will help you facilitate adding a net new one if you need to. And then we just have a general guide of if you're starting from scratch, you have something that isn't in a existing category, isn't something that Ansible has traditionally automated in the past, but you need to create that protocol plugin for it. We have documentation of how to start there and use the kind of the connection plugin primitives in the Ansible code base to get what you want to do, get done what you want to do.